See a lot of orange out there. A lot of Cleveland Browns fans in the house. Yeah, they made the cover of Sports Illustrated for the first time in 4 years. Going to the Super Bowl this year. That's not what we're here to talk about. Now, according to the program this morning, we're supposed to be talking about health and holiness. Several months ago, when we started talking about moving our worship service into this area and celebrating the 10th anniversary of this building and these ministries, health and holiness seemed to be the theme. And then a few weeks ago, I read the lectionary text for today from Luke chapter 13, and I decided really health and holiness are not the two words I want to talk about today. I want to talk about exercising and exorcising. I like those words because they're really, really close. You know, exercising, E-X-E-R-C-I-S-I-N-G, or exorcising, E-X-C-O-R-C-I-S-I-N-G, exorcising. So that's what we want to talk about. In fact, I have found that those two things often go together in ways that we don't think they might go together. In fact, when I was in high school, I worked at Martin Twin Theater. This was back in the day when there were only 2 screens at a theater, sometimes only 1 at some theaters, and movies didn't come out as often as they come out now. In fact, movies would be held over for weeks. When I was working at Martin Twin Theater, Star Wars was held over for 42 weeks. The only movie that was held over longer than Star Wars, and again, we were in Western Kentucky, was Smokey and the Bandit. It was held over for 43 weeks. 43 weeks. I started out in the concession stand at Martin Twin Theater, worked my way up to the ticket counter, and then finally got to be the projectionist there. And it was as a projectionist that I understood the connection between exercising and exorcising. So in 1973, long before I was in high school, the movie The Exorcist came out with Linda Blair. You all remember that movie, right? Some of you do. In 1977, when I was working as a projectionist at Martin Twin Theater, Exorcist 2 came out, The Heretic. Do you remember that one? So what we did at Martin Twin, because our manager thought it was a wonderful thing to do, was at 7 o'clock every night they showed The Exorcist 1, and at 9 o'clock they showed The Exorcist Part 2, so that you could get 2 full Exorcist movies every night for the 11 weeks that they were held over. Now here's what you need to know. I was the projectionist, which means I had to watch The Exorcist and Exorcist 2 every night for 11 weeks. And furthermore, when you are the projectionist, you are the last person to leave the theater. You understand, after the tickets are sold for the last show, the ticket people go home. And after concessions are closed for the last show, the concessions people go home. But the last person to leave the theater is the projectionist. At Martin Twin Theater, the switch for all the lights was at the corner of the screen down front. You getting the picture? So at 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night, when the movie's finally over, everybody's gone. I had to go down to the screen, turn off all the lights, and in the pitch black dark, make my way back to the front of the theater, to the entryway. Exercising and exorcising. I ran every night through the dark. Yeah, exercising and exorcising doesn't just fit together in the terror or the fear of a high school student who's been watching horror movies nonstop for 11 weeks. It also comes together in this space. And interestingly enough, it comes together in today's text in a very unique way. So in Luke chapter 13, the story says that Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, and a woman comes in who was bent over with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was so bent over that she completely was unable to stand up straight. And when Jesus saw her, he called her over, he laid his hands on her, he said, "Be free of your ailment." And immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. Completely unable to stand up. And Jesus exorcised this demon of "I can't" and gave her a spirit of possibility. Exorcised the demon of "I can't," completely unable, and gave her a spirit of possibility. There is no way to know how many other things this woman was unable to do. After all, she was a woman. And while she was in the synagogue, Those of you who've been to Israel and walked into a first century synagogue know that she was unable to sit with the men. And while sitting with the women, she would have been unable to comment or ask any questions about what was going on. Not only was she a woman, but she was infirmed. And while she might have been able to attend the local synagogue, according to the story, she would have never been allowed to go to the temple. She was assumed to be cursed, assumed to be possessed. She was assumed to be outside of God's blessings. In my imagination, your imagination, we could probably come up with a whole list of other things that this woman was not able to do, physically or socially, either because of her infirmity or more likely because of people's attitudes regarding her infirmity. But Jesus exorcised this spirit of I can't and replaced it with possibility. I went surfing for the first time last month. And after 3 good drinks of ocean water, if you know what I mean, I decided I can't do this. So I picked up my surfboard and I was headed to the beach when an abusive instructor, a very kind and caring instructor who only had my best interest in mind said, "You can do this. We're going to get back on this board." And we went wave after wave after wave until I was surfing, exercising this spirit of I can't and offering a spirit of possibility. How many times over 10 years has the spirit of I can't been exercised in this place and a spirit of possibility been given? How many tots have come in here for their very first basketball team, thinking nervously to themselves, because we're all that way, I can't dribble, I can't shoot, I can't reach it, I can't do this? How many persons suffering with Parkinson's has walked in and made their first lap around this track? Persons struggling with their own health or fitness come to the first group fitness class or to their first personal training session. Rehabbing heart patients who's made their way to the fitness room for the first time and gotten on one of those cycles. Stressed out church members and community members who came to their first yoga class and unrolled a mat. And somewhere in most of our minds was that spirit of I can't, and someone helped us exorcise that to say there's possibility. Of course, the story continues and it takes a really odd turn. In fact, after this woman is healed, the leader of the synagogue becomes indignant and yells at Jesus and at the crowd, "There's 6 days you people could be working. Why in the world don't you come here to be cured on those 6 days? Don't work and be cured on the Sabbath day." And Jesus' answer was, "You are such a hypocrite. You would on the Sabbath day, you would take your own ox or your own donkey and take care of that animal and get it a drink of water. Shouldn't this woman, a very daughter of Abraham, ill and bound up and crippled for 18 years, be set free from bondage on the Sabbath day?" Jesus exorcised the spirit of I'm not significant to you are a person of worth. Gave the spirit of worth. Jesus did not mince words here. The meaning is clear. You value your ox and your donkey more than you value another human being. That's exactly what Jesus said. You would care for your ox or your donkey on the Sabbath before you would care for another human being. Where is your sense of human worth? I have owned and loved pets my whole life, except for now. I've had dogs and cats and gerbils and hamsters and fish. I even had a pet squirrel named Elmo once. I have contributed, rightfully so and delightfully so, to the $70 billion a year that we spend caring for our pets. That's the average U.S. expenditure on our pets every year, $70 billion. I was one of the owners and have been one of the owners of the 90 million dogs owned in the United States, and believe it or not, 94 million cats. The cat owners have the dog owners outnumbered, or at least the cats outnumber the dogs. That's 184 million pets, not counting the fish and the gerbils and the hamsters and one squirrel named Elmo. All right, sorry I have to say this, not sorry. Okay, you ready? By the way, I am celebrating the fact that our church has finally been assigned a refugee family to settle here in upstate South Carolina. I am so excited that where there are very few refugees being allowed in the country now, we have finally been assigned a family and will be settling a family here. Our federal government capped the number of refugees to be brought into our country in 2019 to only 30,000 refugee families. In 2020, they are proposing 0 refugee families. Do you know what the cost of settling a refugee family is in the United States? To settle a family in the U.S., get them to the point where they are working, paying taxes, and contributing to society. To settle a family in the United States, it costs $80,000. $80,000. 30 families costs us $2 billion to settle 30,000 families. $2 billion. But we spend $70 billion on 184 million dogs and cats. Jesus said to those who were gathered there that day, you would take care of your ox or your donkey before you would take care of a daughter of Abraham. Where is your sense of worth? One of the beauties of this AYMC is it exorcises the spirit of I am not significant, and it gives the spirit of worth. On the bottom floor of this AYMC is a youth ministry area where youth family is nurtured. Regardless of how you feel about yourself as a young person or what the world tells you about yourself as a young person, you are of worth. It is the primary message of the youth ministry. Several months ago, recognizing the inherent risk, self-harm and social harm that LGBTQ youth were experiencing, in the bottom floor of this building was the first meeting of ministers and therapists in the upstate area to structure and provide safe, supportive space for LGBTQ youth. It does not meet here in our AYMC. It was birthed here with a message of worth. Bike clubs, support groups, school children, all reminded and taught of their worth in this place. But finally, this story ends by saying when Jesus had said all of these things, his opponents were put to shame, but the entire crowd was rejoicing at all of the things that Jesus was saying and doing. This woman had obviously been alone, but that loneliness was replaced with a spirit of community. The spirit of loneliness and isolation was exorcised, and a spirit of community was given to her. The whole crowd was rejoicing. The woman went from a person who was probably ignored and avoided and whispered about to a person who was rejoiced over and welcomed. She found community with God, and she found community with others. I still remember touring the church for the first time, over 5 years ago now, and seeing the AYMC for the first time. And I still remember being impressed with all the stone and the glass and the thought that went into this building. But as I toured the building, what intrigued me most was looking out these windows and seeing that at the edge of the ball field, across from the Swamp Rabbit Trail, there's a bridge that connects our property to the Nicholtown community. And when you move to this side of our building with all the glass, there's a bridge that connects this building to the rest of the church. And in my mind, I was spinning what a beautiful place and what a beautiful symbol that whatever else this space might be, it's a place that connects the church with the world, probably unlike any other space that we have on our campus. Civil servants, police and firemen come here to relax, recreate, work out. Community groups gather here. Other churches and their church leagues come and play on this court. Youth from different schools come here and claim this as one church, where people who otherwise would never set foot in church, this is a space where they come. And they come to understand the love and the grace that is a part of First Baptist and a part of the Christian faith. This is a space, while people play together and pray together and work together, where the spirit of loneliness is exorcised and a spirit of community is given. In fact, it was in this very space downstairs that I met our church staff for the first time. When I came to First Baptist to be the senior minister, I got moved into the office, and the very first full staff meeting with all of our employees was downstairs in this building. They came to hear my story as the new senior minister. They came with questions for a little bit of Q&A. And the very first question that was asked, we've told this story before, Kendra Plating raised her hand, and she said, "Here's my question. Tell us what you expect of us as staff. What do you think church is, and what do you expect of us?" And I really wasn't prepared for a question that big. I was kind of thinking of other little details about my life or something else. And so I kind of spoke off cuff, but the off cuff response has kind of become the mantra for our staff. I said, "I don't expect you to be God, and I don't even expect you to do God's work. I expect us to create a space for God to do God's work." That's what we do. We create a space for God to do God's work. This is not just a place to exercise, E-R-C-I-S-E. This is a place where spirits are exorcised. This is a place where God exorcises I can't, insignificance, loneliness. And it's a space where God provides the spirit of possibility and worth and community.